Hello, it's Brian Lambert, and welcome to the AI Lead Show, your guide to mastering enterprise AI leadership. In this show, we're going to feature expert insights from some of the industry leaders that we've been working with. We'll also explore cutting-edge AI solutions and specifically focus on AI challenges in the enterprise. Looking forward to today's show. We've got an action-packed and amazing team today, and we're going to actually spend a lot of time unpacking what it takes to explore and leverage AI in the enterprise. Just a friendly reminder, every Friday at noon Eastern, we do the AI Lead Show. And we can also follow along on our podcast, the AI Lead Podcast, as well as all of this is built on the AI Lead book, available anywhere books are sold. So let's talk a little bit here about enterprise AI. Let me bring the panel in. Hello, folks. Hey, Mark, Barry, Jim Marie. How are you all doing? You excited to talk about enterprise AI today on the show?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So what is it, right? So consumer AI is focused on your phone and ChatGPT, and I think we spend a lot of time on consumer AI. We are involved in prompting. We are thinking about how we're going to get outputs out. We have AI helping us. We're in a chat bot. Perhaps you have seen AI on a website where you're engaging with the chatbot, or perhaps you've called into a call center on your mobile phone, provider, and you've talked to an AI bot. So I think as consumers, we are very aware over the last few years how AI has evolved. A lot of the people that I talk to, though, and don't really realize what the path is for enterprise AI. And enterprise AI means that AI is coming inside your organization, which means the place that you work will be AI-ified. And what does that mean? And how does that go? And more importantly, how long is that going to take, right? So that's what we're going to explore here on the enterprise AI side. But I want to draw that distinction between consumer and enterprise to help frame this out. And to drive it home, let's explore some of the recent news going on in the enterprise AI space. Over the last couple of shows, we've talked about the investments that the EU have made and the United States have made on infrastructure projects. Well, now we can think about infrastructure in terms of compute power as well. The CPUs, the GPUs, the LPUs that are involved in cranking out these awesome calculations that give us generative AI. SAP has launched Business Data Cloud with Databricks, which is a great platform that helps build and create a layer, if you will, a speed layer that provides actionable insights based on AI. Singapore has allocated $150 million to Enterprise Compute Initiative for AI adoption. They're actually spending a lot of time evolving and investing in initiatives across the world that bring AI and generative AI to the forefront. So this has now become a global movement in many different countries where companies are investing not only on AI as a tool on your phone, but actually investing in what it looks like to bring AI inside of your organization. There's also been a lot of advances in technology, such as databases that handle AI and the fast calculations required to pass data around and to do the math, so to speak. These interactions between databases require an ability to not lose the data. When you have so much data flying around, it's hard to explain how much data is flying around in AI. And it's also very hard to get your head around the math and how fast the math is happening. There are certain aspects of AI that just blow the mind when it comes to compute power and storage power. So a lot of enterprises are trying to figure that out because without the data, you do not have AI, which means you have to have an enterprise approach to managing your data and your compute power in the cloud or on-prem. and you're seeing a lot of companies move to that. So what does that mean? It means more investment is happening in AI. McKinsey, Gartner, Deloitte have all put out recent studies that talk about the trillions of dollars that will be spent on enterprise AI. Early adoption, while slow from a consumer sense, very slow, but from an enterprise sense, actually pretty fast with some proven success. It's because enterprises understand, I believe, the need for starting slow in order to go fast. You're also seeing in the news AI creation tools. There are many different tools, many different use cases that are being brought into enterprises through software as a service. We're also seeing in the news custom AI development, AI engineering, AI development teams, AI agencies that are building bots. A lot of organizations are taking a hybrid approach. In the news, when you look at AI hybrid approach, you're going to see that there's a need for AI cloud compute and then traditional cloud computing, and then also on premises and in the cloud. There's a hybrid approach that many organizations are taking in order to prototype and pilot and have success. And all of this is predicated on, and, I'm saying the word compute. This is hardware. These are hardware investments, infrastructure and hardware investments in order to do the calculations and to do the generative AI so that we can get the value out of it. And that's why you're seeing so many enterprises in the news investing in hardware upgrades, looking at their teams of knowledge workers and purple collar workers to help them get the laptops and the computers that they need to run more memory intensive applications, especially as AI continues to move into the desktop, into the laptop as a critical aspect of purple collar work. So let me bring back the panel here, folks. That's the news from the last week. And what do you think? Commentary time. What do y'all think?
Boy, as I'm thinking about it, and with enterprises, is where do they start? And I know it seems like a basic question, but is it? Do we embed it in our manufacturing process? Is it something we're going to use for customer service? Is it just for internal use for our employees, like a static application, right? Like say you're a customer service person, right? And you've got your what's it on average? There's 7 or 8 different applications a customer service person has open at any one point in time. Of course, they should be integrated, right? So do they use AI as just another app versus as a static instrument? Versus, again, being how do they, again, integrate it into their workflows? The other ones, right? HR, internet, to the technology division, any of those, marketing. So that's what I'm thinking as I'm hearing all this and watching that.
Yeah, I would say start with the data. Definitely start with the data. I really like how in the AI lead book, it discusses this inside out approach to figuring out what data do you have? And I think that's a really good place to start is what is the data that we have and what does that do for us as an organization? So depending on what the organization is doing, that data has value. And they need to figure out where they can use that data's value to build their internal capabilities with AI. And I think that's really the thing that the mystery, right, that we're going to want to help people solve here is understanding that if they have clarity on the data, they know what data they have, and they know they want to use that data for something, that's probably the best place to start with AI and to figure out how to use AI to build the speed layer and really get to the information the data is providing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, just to give a practical example, I downloaded over 100 case studies this week and some other docs out of Seismic. And it took quite a bit because Seismic is not meant to be a place where you actually download content. It's a customer content management system so that you can track and do reporting on what content is doing well internally, but also how the content's being used externally. So after I downloaded it, I uploaded it into Notebook LM, and then I built, a Challenger expert and a Challenger experts in Notebook LM. And then I was able to complete every single task across the sales cycle, proof points, product explanations, a loaded customer research in there. But the way, the programs of the past, the platforms of the past, the enterprise platforms of the past restrict things in a way that gets in the way of being able to use AI in this new world. So when I think about data drag, I think about it not just about the data being absent, but the data being hard to find and access, and guardrails being put into place saying you can't do that.
Yeah, it's a great point. Many of the applications that have been deployed in the enterprise have been deployed to teams using this org chart construct. So you have an org chart, you organize your people that way. Based on how the people are organized, you deploy SaaS, software as a service applications to those teams, which means the software as a service has a team-based departmental view of data. So in a software as a service application, it's all fenced off to help a specific set of people on the org chart. And then here comes AI, and it doesn't care about your org chart. And, so same as your customers, by the way. Your customers don't care about how you're organized. And AI is just like that. So you end up with, well, how are we going to get the value out of this stovepiped siloed data? And all of our data is in these applications, which make it very difficult to download. And that's happening over hundreds of applications, maybe even thousands of applications in a larger enterprise. So if you look at it from a value perspective in a simple math equation, if that data is valuable and you have data about customers, and that data about customers is in 20 different siloed applications, in essence, you're paying 20 times to leverage customer data in 20 different software as a service applications. So that's a problem that enterprises are going to have to deal with, which is why we talk about in the book the speed layer as a way to dump this out and to build out some sort of data lake, data pool, data lake house, something that allows you to have one central place for customer data, for example. Especially when it comes to generative AI. I'm not talking about the bean counting and the financial reporting and all that. I'm talking about building training manuals, building customer service manuals, building marketing materials, building emails, all of the things that help you relate with customers. So it's a big, big problem. And this is why Satya Nadella at Microsoft believes that software as a service is not long for the world. It will be dead and replaced with artificial intelligence agents and artificial intelligence applications that can leverage data in a smart way.
And we never imagined that would happen.
No, but I'm glad for it, because a lot of those silos are person-made silos to make sense of the world. And when you need to organize work by fragmenting out the knowledge workers and fragmenting out the data, it really impacts the customer experience, and it impacts your competitiveness. So here we have the very tool that Frederick Taylor in the industrial age has said, hey, this is going to make us competitive because we can divide up the labor, is the very thing that holds us back in the digital age, right? Yeah. So that's the problem.
I think you said it all really well, Brian, that all these different tools out there, there's just so many of them. They all have redundant data, and really getting to that data and making good sense of it is going to be the strategy moving forward. It needs to be, it has to be, or these companies are going to fall behind.
Yeah, which is a great segue to our digital dilemma and how do we push this boulder up the hill, right? So let's talk about why AI implementations stall or why they fail from the get-go. It's hard to push this up the hill because companies haven't thought about this, right? It hasn't quite dawned on organizations. When I say organizations, when I say companies, I mean the leaders, the business side and the tech side haven't quite rationalized what this actually means for the go forward strategy. So where do you invest? Where do you apply your resources? And then more importantly, what's the mental model or what's the architectural model that you want to deploy? If you have AI as a task-based tool, as an outputter, that's quite different than an AI brain that everybody taps into that can grab data from anywhere. That architecture is completely different. And so and the way that this would play out is why AI stalls is because if you have 100 apps and all of them have 100 chat bots deployed, so there's 100 apps with a chat bot. That's 100 chat bots. Those chat bots are detached largely from a single source of data. Most of them are actually not even connected to your enterprise data at all. They're just hooked to the internet like ChatGPT without your proprietary data. So now you have 100 chat bots talking to large language models. And guess what happens in that? Well, you train the large language models with 100 chat bots. So does every other company. And what does the large language model do? Lowest common denominator. They all start sounding the same. So how do you prevent that from happening? Well, you need to have strategic alignment with your business goals. You need to think about your proprietary data because that's your competitive advantage. And you need to have those policies and governance rules in place to not just start training large language models with that, which is a legal thing. There's policies, procedures, but most people are not aware at the knowledge worker level of how these things work. And IT teams don't have the budgets and the resources to start deploying a more private view of enterprise AI. So there's a huge amount of tension in the system of we have this really cool tool and yet we can't really unlock it. And the last thing I'll say on that is Amazon had this effect on every consumer on the planet and changed the whole entire paradigm of how you buy things. But if you think about Amazon's approach and how long it's taken to even start thinking about bringing something like that into each enterprise, to bring those lessons learned into each organization and operate that way. I last year, there were companies that could not, they would ship things on trucks and boats and they wouldn't even know where it is, business to business, enterprise to enterprise. While conversely, in a consumer stance, Amazon can tell you where your toothbrush is 10 stops away. So you have this disconnect between consumer, ability of understanding where a toothbrush is versus an enterprise shipping millions, if not billions of dollars across the ocean on trains and trucks that have no idea how many stops away, what interstate it's on, where it is physically located. That whole paradigm is completely different in the enterprise. And that's what's happening here with AI. So what do you all think? What's the ROI? How do you tackle these types of issues? And have you seen this play out in your own organizations where there's so much to think about that it either appears to be slow or maybe even a non-starter? Maybe there's some places you're aware of that are not even looking at AI. What do you think?
Well, the point that I'd make on it is not that specific organizations. It's in the industry that I work in. It comes down to what's the first step. I mean, when these organizations see AI, it's like, oh, let's take advantage of it. This is wonderful, and they're not quite sure how they need to do that. But then it comes down to, right, do we first connect all our disconnected systems so that everything talks to each other, so we have access or a single source of truth to all our data? Is that the first step? And then do they have to deconstruct the applications that they have within the departments now because they're not connecting across those various departments and thus are not able to leverage or optimize AI in the first place? So what's the first step I think that they're thinking that they need to take on this journey? And that's the data drag component, right? If everything's disconnected.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot there's those decisions There's also the idea of how do you build in parallel, right? There are a lot of pilots happening, and perhaps many employees are not even aware of where organizations or teams are exploring AI. So maybe it's as simple as you might not think it's happening, but it probably is somewhere in your organization. And then as a worker, a knowledge worker or a purple collar worker, what's your role in that, right?
Well, I think that the working in parallel is really important for enterprise, for companies that pull in consumer AI like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Notebook LM, HeyGen, whatever. Those folks are kind of out in front, and they're allowing their teams to use it as it is today. They go through a security review, et cetera. I saw a thing where someone was doing customer research with Perplexity, which is really the most powerful tool. And they asked, hey, how do I run this prompt or that prompt to get things quicker, et cetera? And then I'm going back and forth between the enterprise tools and this consumer tool. And IT said, hey, you might not know this, but we're actually working on a project, and it's coming 1 to 2 quarters from now, where the enterprise tool will call the Perplexity API and pull that information in. So it's going to be embedded in the workflow. So what do we do for the next 6 months, for heaven's sakes? And the answer has to be, in my mind, until someone tells me to stop, teach them how to use the consumer tools. And then we're going to have a change management, just like always, to give them the opportunity to let go of the consumer tools and use the AI functionality within the enterprise tools. Really, really tough transition that's going to happen in 2026, 2027. But for now, they have access to everything they need in the consumer tools.
Yeah, I like that. I like the timeline view there. So if this year, 2025, it is a foundational year, enterprises could be thinking about how do we use consumer AI, using that as a framework. What are the policies and the asks of people? Hey, for example, please don't upload our pricing information to these bots, right?
They really need to put some guidance out there. If they don't want to give away their information, that's really important.
Yeah, every company should have a policy right now, if they don't already, about here's what you're allowed to use. You can go ahead and use these consumer tools. However, here's what you do not do. You do not upload customer information. You do not upload proprietary information. You do not upload travel plans. You do not upload pricing information. You do not upload anything considered competitive, proprietary, confidential. You can't do that because it will train the model. Even though you're using it at work, it is training the large language model, the platform model, right? So
I think there's so much disruption opportunity here, but I would just sort of throw something out for thought. If we treat AI and how we use it as just another technology, another software app, we will not get there. So I just sort of throw that out for us to think about, because a typical change management project is really geared around a beginning and an end of a very specific tool. And this needs to be a little different if you're going to actually get something out of your data and create something strategic for the enterprise. So I do think there's opportunity, but I think we need to be careful with the opportunity to make sure that it's going to be good for the business.
Absolutely. Great points. Love that. Yeah, now let's talk about what the opportunities are in that, right? So in the big scheme of things, we're not talking about being overly restrictive. We're talking about what makes sense for the organization. If the organization has been around for any length of time, it's safe to say that there's some sort of competitive advantage there. And so in that competitive advantage, as it's competing in the marketplace, there are things that are okay to use in a large language model, a platform model, and there's things that we shouldn't necessarily share with the world. Right. So we've had this in email. We've had this in SMSing. We've had this in what we say in public events. Like, this is not a new concept. it's just easier to get away with blasting this out because you're at your computer, right? And it's just the windows right there, and up you go, load it on up. But as an employee,
Guilty.
you have a responsibility, though, to protect the company, right?
Yeah.
So in that view, what we're talking about is an opportunity, right? So how do we frame this as a win-win for everybody? Well, first of all, if you want your company to be around for a long time, it's important to protect its competitive advantage. It pays your paycheck. That's another thing. You've probably signed some policies. When you became an employee, there's things that you agreed to. As a leader in the business, you also have a responsibility to disclose things, et cetera, that needs to be disclosed. So in that view, that whole thing aside, and maybe we have a legal policy show later, let's put that aside and say, enterprise AI, we're onto something here. Let's start small. Let's run in parallel. Let's follow the guidelines of our companies. Let's make sure we understand how AI can be used and how we can leverage it. Let's also be aware there's some things happening that we may or may not be aware of right now. So it's probably coming. So let's be, good stewards in that way. So what does that mean then for tech teams? From a tech team perspective, Barry, you talked about how your organization has processes to do a tech review. You alluded to, you also have a technology team or people coming to you saying, hey, by the way, this is what we're working on. Right. So this idea that AI is aligned to the business strategy seems to be playing out at your organization. Tell us a little bit more about the opportunity to leverage AI, perhaps in this framework here, where we talk about aligning with the strategy, ensuring governance, enabling teams, and then, what are some of the impacts? Do you have any stories that you can share in your own organization from your past experience?
Yeah, I think one thing that has been interesting is an annual playbook. Think of an annual playbook for a sales organization. And then imagine that playbook outlines all the expectations for given roles across the sales org. But then if you're working with a vendor and you're going to outsource some of that work, how do you write the expectations of the vendor so that SOW is just really super solid and you can have KPIs in place and monitoring success, et cetera, to determine if you would continue with that vendor. In that situation, I used that internal playbook, which was very well written and verbose, and I was asked to write a section about 10 pages of the SOW. And I was able to write that in probably 5 to 10 minutes using generative AI. In the past, I would have had to interview experts. I would have had to write it. My writing style or my expertise or knowledge just wouldn't be where it needs to be. But I align AI with business strategy. That just is the example that I have, because the business strategy was written in the playbook. And in order for me to align to it, all I had to do was copy the playbook, create a GPT or a prompt. And that GPT then guided me through writing 10 pages of the SOW.
Yeah, it's a great example. And here's another idea too. Thanks to Ken in the chat. He's talking about perhaps there's also a philosophy or a strategy here to embrace open source LLMs, right? So there are projects out there where people are teaming up to build open source LLMs, and you could deploy those internally and build your own, sometimes called small language model or large language model, that allow you to, in essence, unplug from the Chat GPT, meter, right? So if you think about, like we talked about on the last show, these platform models are utilities. Every time you plug into these platform models like OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, those are meters that are running when you plug into them. With an open source LLM, if you can build the skill set internally, you can deploy an LLM inside your four walls, so to speak, or inside your own firewall, and keep it private, and then start playing with your own projects to build out basically your own internal brain as a company. And I think Ken's got a good point that there should be projects like that to start tinkering. There should also be a strategy, back to aligning with the strategy, that these things need to be on the roadmap because, again, in an organization, in a competitive environment, your intellectual property, the way in which you work, the value that you create as an organization needs to be protected from others in a competitive environment. And you need to think about it as a core competency, just like you always have. But when AI comes along, it needs to be a core capability, right? So you have to have a capability to harness generative AI. And that requires a strategy and governance and data security to prevent data leakage, to prevent the bad guys from coming in. The AI bad guys, you need to have the AI good guys that keep out the bad guys, right? So there's a lot going on in the space that's happening, and it's a critical discussion that needs to be happening with many people in the organization, not just the tech team.
I like Ken's suggestion as well because it's a good way where you already know the staff might be using this consumer AI already. And if you now have one that's inside the organization that works just like the one outside the organization, you're going to get more user buy-in. You're going to have adoption. It's going to move faster for you when you're trying to implement it.
Is it economically feasible for companies to, build their own large language models at this point?
Well, they're not building them. They're taking the large language model, which is a data set,
right,
and they're deploying it on their own internal servers.
And the open source projects are going through the process to train the LLMs, just like OpenAI spent trillions of dollars to train the model on their own, and it was cost prohibitive to even think about it. But DeepSeek, that's why we talked about the DeepSeek news a couple of shows ago, they were able to do it a lot cheaper. Yeah. When you democratize that training of the LLM to many people in an open source project, everybody contributes a little, and you end up with an open source LLM that you can that is trained, and you don't have to pay for it. So it's free electricity, it's free power in that way.
But
which is
slower. I mean, it's very slow, or at least what I've seen. Instead of an API call to a large language model hosted by the I guess the inventor or the creators of a given LLM, when it's hosted internally, unless you do the hardware investment, that speed layer, as Jen was saying, is the issue.
Yeah, you need to have the compute. That's why I think people will deploy it on their own AI cloud. You're seeing data centers pop up that have the NVIDIA LPUs in them, and people are selling AI cloud to do that compute. And that's the same thing, right? We're not necessarily talking about deploying a server under your desk to run this. You're still going to have to borrow that compute power, but you're not going to have to pay for the use of the large language model that's been trained. You're not going to have to pay that tax.
That token.
You're just going to have to pay for the compute power. Yeah. So if you do, there's some pretty interesting. I can't remember the name of the companies that I've talked to, but they're pretty interesting consumption-based models on those AI data centers that they're playing with, and it's changing the economics, just like cloud did. So let's talk about and give some advice here for folks that might be getting ready for AI. Remember, we're talking about enterprise AI. We're giving some tips along the way, and really what we're talking about from a process here that I shared in the AI lead book. It's this idea that you need to have a leadership vision. You need to have a strategy. You also have to recognize that the technology already exists. Like, you don't have to go out and develop an entirely new technology to do this. The tech is there. The challenge to overcome is with people and data, right? So Accenture says 80% of digital transformations have failed. Why is that? Well, my premise is, and I believe it's because of the data drag, and also the humans involved. And so this is as much a leadership challenge as it is anything else. McKinsey put out a report last week that talked about the number one challenge in AI is the human element and the embracing of and working in new ways. McKinsey won't even get involved unless the board signs off on it. Not even the CEO. The board has to sign off on anything McKinsey does. This is a massive, massive change management challenge for everybody. And you know what? There just aren't enough skilled people to go out and build all these AI apps. But you know what? There's AI to help you with that. So you've got to build a team that at least has some chops in AI. There's a lot of different flavors of that. Maybe that's a separate show. But then you should set some goals. You should have an AI roadmap. You should have an understanding of what maturity looks like over a continuum. You should have a strategy to move from A to B to C to D. And that means you need to understand, like Jen Marie was talking about at the beginning of the show, what data is involved here. If data is the lifeblood of the organization, and you're going to create generative AI applications, it will not work without data. So your choice is to get your data under control and get the right data into these AI applications, or simply plug into the internet like consumer AI model does. So that's the choices. From there, we've talked a lot about starting small, test and learn, fail fast, and learn as you go, and then build the building blocks for growth and scalability. If you think about scaling it to everybody right out of the gate, that could actually sink your project. You got to have a plan for implementation, and that means adoption, and that means training, and that means mindset, and that means overcoming the tangles involved and the barriers, the mental blockers to using AI on the job. So what other advice do you have, team, on maybe getting started with enterprise AI? Any things that you've learned in the past year or so that you want to share with our listeners and our viewers?
Well, I would say that focus on the mindset. Folks really come into this world, and especially when they're joining a new company, and they don't know what they don't know. And I guess I don't think it's so much about the skills, because we just need them using the AI. You know how know that you're a writer because you write every day. So you know how you're an AI leader? It's because you choose to use AI rather than to try to do it yourself. And that may seem odd. You might be embarrassed to say, oh, I need to write this requirements document for a conversational AI platform that coaches people against a standard sales methodology. In order to write that requirements document, I'll, use my expertise and I'll interview a bunch of people. Well, why don't you just load a lot of whatever it might be, documents, white papers, etc., into a large language model ecosystem like NotebookLM or even ChatGPT, and then go ahead and build it and write that requirements document super fast. Use it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I think you start small and you start easy. I think most people are using it from a consumer standpoint, but within the organization, again, it's all right. And we talked about this. How do you build your custom chat internally? And you get a few people to work on it, test it out, and begin to, and maybe it's just one specific part of the organization. Maybe it's just around, creating marketing material, or maybe it's just around customer service, and helping those individuals, and then determining, okay, how well does that work, and what data it's like any project, having a team come back and report on how well it's working and what challenges they have and what they see, and then continue to grow, and then eventually, use it outside the organization once you're able to. So I think people are just tentative, or they're just afraid what's going to happen if we do it wrong. So which makes sense. So start internally, start small, gather the people that are early adopters, have them start using it, communicate it throughout the rest of the organization in terms of how well it's working, gather feedback, and then take it to the next step, which is externally.
Well, I think they should start talking at the strategy level as well, if they haven't done anything yet. And I think they could maybe have this pilot, if you will, run concurrently with a more strategic discussion, because I do think it's going to be important that people know how to use it properly and how to understand it. I saw that Ken commented that we need to make sure we're ready to deal with these happy little accidents. So we're not just passing on information without proofreading it first or making sure that it makes sense. So there's different things that need to happen in the way that we work. And if we're not purposeful about doing that, it's not going to get the traction that a company is going to need. So it's got to be a part of the strategy, even if it's at a small scale. And it really needs to connect back to what is the purpose. And I think you find that answer with the data, and you find that answer with dialogue across your executive leaders to figure out where can we get the most lift from doing this activity inside the organization today.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and another thing that could help is sharing with people what's working and sharing with people what does work. And I actually, let's do that. Let's take some action here. I'm going to wave my magic wand, and all of our viewers and listeners are now in charge. I'm going to give them a big fancy title of Chief Data and Digital Transformation Officer. So now you're over all the data and all the digital transformation. So congratulations. What are you going to do? So it's easy to say, hey, we should do this, we should do that. But now you're really going to lay the foundation for the competitive advantage of the organization into a whole new AI age. How are you going to go about it? What would success look like? And now let's bring it home a little bit more and bring it into healthcare. So healthcare as an industry is full of data. We've seen medical records go digital in the United States. There's a lot of telemetry. There's a lot of machinery. There's a lot of medical devices. There's a lot of insurance claims. There's just a lot of tons and tons of data, right? So you can probably have empathy now for a little bit for the world of a chief data and digital transformation officer in a, like, for example, a healthcare organization that has 200 hospitals, and clinics. So, how what's the value? What's the value of AI, and how can we use it? Well, we can use it to diagnose medical conditions. You may have heard in the news a month or two ago how AI could actually out-diagnose doctors when used appropriately. There's also examples of using your phone to scan your face and get a preliminary diagnosis. It's creepy, but it's real. It happens, and that's a visual AI using visuals, right? So it happens. And then risk scoring, predictive health deterioration based on lab results, based on what they're saying in the doctor's records. Clinical alerts for real-time intervention. I mean, we've heard horror stories of people dying in the waiting room. How do you prevent that from happening? Expert validation, ensuring that AI aligns with human expertise, right? So how would we start small in that, and when literally, lives are at stake? And that's why I picked this on purpose. And so, oh my gosh, this sounds daunting. Holy cow.
And what's funny about the stovepipes in particular here, though, Brian, I have some medical things, nothing that's killing me, just so we're all clear. But ultimately, someone's medical needs are currently stovepiped. So I like this as a topic because I have to go to a different doctor for every part of my body. Why is that? My body is one connected thing, right? So if AI can connect the dots of all of these stovepipes, all of these doctors, then yes, please, because I do think it might come up with a better answer than having to go talk to 5 experts who are only focused on one part of my body. So I think it could be a really good thing to disrupt the way we do medicine.
I mean, talk about silos. Not only is it the different parts of your body, but also there's you and there's the privacy on your medical experience, and then every single person's other medical experience. Let's merge that together, at least for the access to the doctors, and accelerate, the 3 steps that you could take to not just diagnose, but cure.
Yeah.
But you'll only be able to do that by fax, Barry. You have to fax it to them. You can't email about that.
Well, hold on with the cure too, because then we're talking about a whole different industry, the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh,
That's a whole different problem.
Well, what I meant, what if we didn't have to have pharmaceuticals?
Yes, amazing.
That's what I meant.
Why are we whispering?
Well, because you don't want the healthcare industry to get upset with us. But I mean, if you had access to all that data, rather than the data dragging the silos, I really do believe you could say tomatoes, cucumbers, and don't eat meat.
Yeah.
But,
by zip code. Like you could actually say, hey, this is what's happening in this zip code. Maybe there's something going on there.
Yeah.
But
instead of waiting for the reporting from, 22 hospitals that there might be
creating 3 new drugs.
Right. Yeah. So, as I talk about in the AI lead, it's important to bring together the tech view of this plus the business side of that and bring it together. One of the tools that helps with that is frameworks. And one of the frameworks that a lot of tech teams need to start thinking about, and I want to show here on the screen for our show viewers, is really an architectural framework that allows tech teams and business teams to think through the impacts of AI and, more importantly, scoping and figuring out how to get started. So, if you're listening to the show and you're not watching, we have a framework here. It's layered. We have data sources. Then we need to integrate those data sources and normalize those data sources. Then we need to process the data and get the analytics to connect the dots. We must do that in a secure and stored way because we have HIPAA, but more importantly, we have, privacy, and we need to keep that data secure. And then eventually we need to help on the front line where the doctors care, the nurses care. We need to be able to help them with their decision-making. So if you think of that as a layered view, which I'm showing on the screen, sources, integrate those sources, process the data, keep it safe and secure, and then make decisions. That base is in essence a speed layer. And we talk about in the AI lead the concept of a speed layer to help with this as a framework to get it started. But one of the reasons why AI implementations often fail is they're not thinking holistically about the data view, nor are teams working together, business and technology teams, to come together to figure out how to make it work over the long term, right? So you have to take short-term actions to deploy this, but you have to take those short-term actions in service of the broader outcome. So when you look at, hey, how do we recognize patterns in a zip code? Well, we might need to use, tools. We might need to use algorithms. We might need to lean into the advances in NLP, predictive models. We might need to use tools like TensorFlow or other technology tools to help figure out the patterns. The technology exists. What doesn't exist is how does it all hook together in order to drive value and improve patient outcomes in this way. And the biggest challenge that I see, whether it's in a healthcare, whether it's in manufacturing, even in IT organizations, technology organizations, is really at the data level, which is why I wrote the book. There's a lack of data governance. There's a lack of security protocols. There's really this, hey, we have unlimited storage. So if we store all of our data in a bunch of different silos and keep those silos protected, we're good. There's a training issue. There's skills gaps issues. These are major impacts to data drag that really keep AI at bay and keep it slow. And one of the things that happens, the outcome of all that is you don't have an integrated view, you don't have a holistic system, you don't have a strategic approach, you're not aligning business with technology in this new paradigm where generative AI is like your organization's brain.
And how good are your insights, right? And your analytics if those aren't connected.
Right. So does a framework like this, when you think about all of this, hey, we're going to improve healthcare, but does a framework like this help think through the business impact, the patient impact, and then the technology impact to you? How does it help?
I mean, I think it's important to bring those two things together. I mean, even maybe more important now than it ever was in the way that we're implementing these change technologies. So we definitely need to figure out how to connect those dots better and maybe even leverage the different AI capabilities to connect those dots for us when maybe we're not able to because we are stuck in our own stovepipe.
Yeah.
I don't think we have the skills in the technology IT world to actually implement this globally.
Yeah,
what do you mean?
Look at all the various departments, from genomics to medical imaging to lab results. I mean, how are all those different departments going to work together to be able to do this? I think that's just kind of one of the first components of it. How do you get everybody to swim in the same direction?
Because I mean, the where are folks learning this technology? And my son's a computer science major learning programming, and a lot of the things that he's learning, I think is, foundational from 5 years ago. And this is moving at such a speed that I can't imagine that people are really going to be able to keep up.
Oh, I'll tell you. So I had an event 3 weeks ago, brand new college grad there from a very reputable school that everybody would know. First year in career, graduated with a computer science degree from this school that everybody would know. He's been out in the workforce for 7 months, and he came to my AI workshop, and where we were talking about how do you deploy enterprise AI, how do you get started, there's different technologies, and he told me what he was building. And let's just pretend he was building something like a piece of what's on the screen. He was building a system that retrieved enterprise data, using generative AI to create some sort of, output, something basic like that. And I said, hey, before you go into this in more detail, since you're so new to the workforce, hope you don't mind me asking, but you have a computer science degree. What they taught you in that computer science degree, what are you using right now, 7 months into the job, to build this AI system? And he thought about it for 10 seconds and he said, you know what? Nothing other than Python. I learned Python. I'm using Pythons, but the rest of it I've had to learn since I graduated school, watching YouTube videos. So,
problem.
yeah. There's two ways to look at it. One, it's a problem. To Barry's point, they're teaching stuff 5 years ago because that's the industrial age. That's how everybody grew up, et cetera, et cetera. The other way I would flip it and say, look, that's a level playing field, right? So here we have a young person right out of college that basically has the same starting point as the 55-year-old as well, right? It comes down to how do you choose to use your time. We all have the same starting point. There's ChatGPT came out 2 years ago. What have you done since? And if you're not rethinking how this is going to work and how you're going to leverage AI, then you're quote unquote behind. But if you don't jump in now and start playing with it, everybody else is starting to get more acclimated and starting to tinker will also pass you by. So it's a level playing field. This person just happens to be in a spot where they're knighted to go play with AI. So sometimes you have to knight yourself and go play with it.
Yeah, and you know what? If you're not in a corporation that allows you to knight yourself and tinker, you might want to decide to be somewhere else.
Yeah, or spend your nights and weekends doing that. Depends on what it means to you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's see. What's some aha moments for you, panel? Let's talk about that. What are some of the key takeaways and aha moments from today's show that you want to share with our viewers and our listeners.
I think for me was maybe more specifically around the organizations building their own internal LLMs, and I didn't think they could do that at this point in time, and that was something that was happening. So I was somewhat surprised in a pleasant way that's it's going to make things easier for them going forward, that they don't have to rely on the major players and pay for all that computing power down the road. So we'll see how that will change. Found that interesting.
On that point, it reminds me, I'm just smiling. I know Ken's in the audience here. Ken and I were having a one-on-one like a year or two ago, something. And he said, well, no, I deployed it and I just did all of this and so forth. And I didn't actually connect the dots about the fact that he had, I guess, deployed it on his laptop or somewhere internally. And I didn't realize that that was possible. And so the reason I bring that up is I'm laughing at myself long ago, whatever that was, 18 months ago, a year ago, because I didn't really understand what Ken was doing. And like you were saying, Brian, if you're not engaged in this and trying to use it every day, provide value every day, and have those aha moments like Mark just shared, then 18 more months are going to go by and you are absolutely out of the space. And you've got to be using consumer AI. It is hopefully coming into your enterprise. It is different from enterprise AI in that enterprise AI, brings it into Salesforce, brings it into whatever your core tools are. And one day we'll go through that change management, but it is very, very different in terms of the cost, the speed, the scalability, the number of tools, all of those things. And the corporate, entities just doesn't have enough resources like the great software development teams at Google or Facebook or OpenAI, et cetera. So you can't expect the corporations to keep up in terms of launch speed or even user interface design.
But they don't really have to keep up. They just need to start thinking about it and doing something now. And if they're not doing something to think about enterprise AI, then how will they prevent being overcome by their employees' use of consumer AI? So I think that's a big aha for me. Like,
Right.
What are companies going to start doing, saying, governing, putting policies in place? Because it's already happening. Their employees are using consumer AI all the time, and they really do need to be paying attention.
And even I agree with even in HR practices, because I do think there are some folks who have jobs that have become so simple, they could actually have 3 jobs. And so now what? The laws don't allow us to have 3 jobs, I don't think, not in corporations. And so, but you actually have enough time now to have 3 jobs.
Well, one of them should be learning about AI.
Yes.
I know, but I believe you learn through experience.
Very be careful. They're going to make it do more work.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I think it would behoove everybody to actually think about taking on this learning journey as an intentional, career booster. And if you don't know where to start, you can check out Digital Command. You can go to purplecollar.pro and see where to start. But the issue that many people have is they expect their company to provide it. They expect their path to be defined, and they want the sure thing. And in today's world, right now at this moment, you don't have the sure thing other than AI is going to come. It's already here. Your company is not going to provide it. It's a laggard on purpose, by design, right now, for security, for safety, for the fact that there isn't enough skills to people internally to do it. It's going to lag behind. So you have an opportunity to be part of that solution and you have an opportunity to become that kind of advocate to help others, there's a whole bunch of opportunity in the AI space, including all the new jobs that are going to get created from this. And then the other thing is, if you're expecting the answer, the answer is going to come by doing things, not by somebody suddenly giving you an answer. So that's why taking the action is critical. It's really important. Well, I know I could talk about this for a long time, but I know we're running out of time here. It's a fast hour on these shows, and I hope you feel the same way. Our next show is actually going to be getting started. How do you get started with enterprise AI? We're going to talk about that very specifically. We talked big picture today, the difference between consumer AI and also enterprise AI. So we'll double click into how to get started on the next show. As a friendly reminder, go to digitalcommand.co/webinars. We have 2 webinars coming up, including how do you overcome the hype, and also a whole series of use cases in another webinar on AI use cases. We're actually going to talk about use cases for the whole webinar. So that's an important piece of it. So a call to action here on the show today is to unlock your potential. You have to figure out what that is. Nobody's going to tell you what that is. You have to engage. You have to explore. You have to find your own path. We hope that the show has made that easier for you. Keep engaging on the show. Keep listening to the podcast. Get the AI Lead book, and check out the resources we have to make your path faster, easier, and more simple. On behalf of Mark and Jen Marie and Barry, thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning in to the AI Lead Show. We'll see you next week, every Friday at noon. This is Brian Lambert. Take care.